Hi, I'm Robbie Jeanette with Keyboard Magazine here in the rehearsal studio, The Secret Space, with Adam Wakeman, who's been kind enough to give us a little tour of his rig. Adam, good to see you.
Good to see you again. Welcome. It's actually the same room as before,
Indeed.
3 years ago or whatever it was.
But
last
we met Adam, he was playing with Ozzy on his solo tour, and now this is the big Black Sabbath tour, which is going to launch and run through the end of the year.
Yep.
Maybe into next year, we don't know.
Who knows? Who knows?
And so you've got Korg rig, you got the M3 on top and the Kronos on the bottom. How did you wind up with these two keyboards, and how have they worked for you?
Well, it's not just a blatant advert for Korg gear. It's like I genuinely do like both these keyboards. The Kronos replaced my Triton Extreme, which I was a huge fan of. I had for 10 years and finally retired that last year.
Okay.
And I do like this. I love the kind of bigger screen, and it makes going between the M3 and this kind of a bit crazy because obviously everything's a bit bigger on here and the screen's smaller. So I'm beginning to think I might need glasses now. But it's cool, and I've always liked the M3. I mean, it's kind of that's been a part of my rig for
The action on this is particularly playable.
I do like it. I like it a lot. I had a couple of problems with the Kronos where to do a sensitivity of the keys double triggering. So I think they reset the bed, or they put a new keyboard in, or did something. And this is actually hired stuff. This is Korg US sorted out the Kronos, and then higher place up the road. I can't remember the name of. I'll have to think.
That's
all
right.
What it's called. But anyway, Korg basically sorted out this because my gear's all in New Zealand because we start the tour in New Zealand.
Oh wow!
In a few days' time, so we fly out there at the weekend. But all our gear was shipped over, like a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago. So
cool.
So a lot of the thing that isn't here that I will be using is my Motion Sound 145, the Leslie style cabinet, which goes everywhere with me, mainly.
So how did you have the patches for this?
Well, this is very different from the Aussie thing. There's the main reason is I play a lot more guitar now, which is probably of very little interest to keyboard players, but a lot of the stuff where there weren't keyboards on the original.
Right.
I'm speaking to Tony, and he's like, well, happy for you to play guitar. If you're happy to play guitar, I'm like, yeah, whatever is gonna, my primary role is to make sure try and make it sound as good as possible.
Yeah. Whether
that means playing keys or playing guitar.
Sure.
There's some samples that obviously you have to trigger things. The start of Sweet Leaf and Black Sabbath with the Thunder and Lightning and the bell and stuff like that.
So you're triggering all that.
I trigger those things, and then those songs I tend to play keyboards in. So I've got the kind of either distorted kind of organ sound or sort of distorted Fender Rhodes. This thing is like kind of distorted sort of organs sound, but this will actually be running through the Motion Sound when we do the shows, and then that's like the Dirty Women bit, the outro bit. So you'll have that sort of nice distorted organ, and then the kind of strings. But then a lot of the other, either I'm doing the distorted stuff like that, or it's distorted rock on the guitar.
Yes. So now people might be familiar that your dad played on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath.
He did, yeah.
Did you call him up for any tips on what he did on the record?
No, he's never been very good at that. He's never been very good with.
He had no studio notes from back in the day.
No, God, no. I had a conversation with him when we did this Hampson Court show a few years back. And I was talking to him and a percussion player called Ray Cooper, who
played with Elton John.
Yeah, played with and
Clapton Unplugged.
What a legend! And I was really privileged to sit down with the two of them, and I was, saying, so you guys must have done a lot of sessions together. And Ray said we probably did about 1,000 sessions together.
1,000.
1,000 sessions. And I said, what was the most memorable? And he goes, I can't remember any of them. I'm like, well, it's the 70s, I guess.
Yeah.
But he said it wasn't so much that, it was the fact that they would do 3 sessions a day. Back then it was
Wow.
one studio, and he said you could do more if you wanted to.
Yeah.
And he would go from one studio to another studio. Oh, it's Rick Wakeman. Hi, Rick, let's play that tune. And then my dad would go off and do another one for T-Rex, and it would be this kind of crazy thing. Every week was the same.
Awesome.
And it went on for so long. You know, they did do thousands and thousands of sessions.
So many that he literally has no memory
He
of.
literally can't remember which ones are which. I've phoned my dad before and said, I've just had a message from somebody saying, did your dad play on this track? And I phoned him up and he's going, I've no idea. He really doesn't know.
Wow. That's a legendary career there.
Well, I think that's when you become legendary, is when you can't actually remember doing most of the shit you've already done.
Right on. So, what are some other keyboard parts that? Because obviously, people know Sabbath. They don't know it as really a keyboard band, but there are some iconic parts. What would you say are the most iconic keyboard songs in the Sabbath repertoire?
Well, it depends. Most of my job is doubling Tony's part, so that when he goes into the solos and things, that there's something underneath, and it's not just the sort of bass. However, I swing between the two ways of thinking with this, because I really like the early Sabbath stuff where, it was recorded live and there are no second guitar parts.
Right.
And for me, it takes away if you can then start putting some things underneath.
Yeah.
And Tony's brilliant. He's kind of, just do whatever you like. Sounds, whatever you like that sounds right.
Yeah.
He kind of leaves it to me to make sure that, I'm not going to.
Has he looked over at some point and said that does not sound right?
No, fortunately not. No, he hasn't. But I'm always expecting that.
Yeah.
I think that's what. I think one of the things that is probably good is that I'm a keyboard player first, and I'm a guitar player second. So I'm never going to be a frustrated guitar player kind of wanting to play more through Sabbath songs. It's like, I just want to lock into what Tony's doing. I've got Tony panned. I use these JH 16s here, which I've had for about 3 years, and that's the most important thing I think I've got out of all my gear.
Because you got Tony panned in one side.
I've got Tony panned quite sort of 10 to that side, and then I've got my guitar this side, so I can kind of, his picking is very precise, so it's kind of locking in with him. And again, the same if I'm playing the same riffs on the keys, it's kind of it's just important to tie in with him.
Do you have your keys panned as well, so you can kind of?
No, I've got my keys are stereo, and as I say, my main mixer and stuff isn't here, but the way that we work it, which is sort of similar to with the Aussie tour, we had the organ patches that I use out of the Kronos come out of a different output. They go to the Leslie, and then that's got 3 mics on it, and I get that sent back to me in the in-ears. That doesn't go through my mixer.
Okay.
And then I've got keys left and right, which is basically these two. So that's the distorted Fender Rhodes kind of sounds.
So what patches are you running off the M3?
It's mainly the strings and sort of paddy sort of things. Yeah, it's that. So there's not a great deal of keys in this set. I can't really give you too well. You've seen a few of the songs here, but not you.
No. We're on lockdown with the set list.
Yeah.
This is good.
Yeah, there's some sort of string parts which are kind of come from that. And then I've got the samples. One thing that's changed again is I used to use the Akai Z8 samplers, which I loved to use for years. And on the last tour, I had the first experience of it failing.
Oh.
And I've got a backup anyway, which is kind of tucked away over there somewhere, which is going to be retired into a room very shortly. Because I just use the sampler in here.
In the Kronos.
I've got all that mapped out, and then I've got a backup on the M3. So if something goes wrong with this, I use an additional 2 outputs from the Kronos, so that Greg, front of house engineer, is using. He can get the samples separately to keys left and right.
Right.
Basically, the more control he has, the kind of better.
Yeah.
So he has the samples and effects left and right, but in the case of an emergency, if that goes down, they're still here, and it would just come out of keys 1 and 2, come out the left and right channel.
So even though you don't have a backup of each keyboard, you have a backup scenario. So what if the M3 goes down, you have strings on the Kronos?
Yep.
Same thing?
Yep, same thing. I can,
Each keyboard can double as it's...
Yeah, and it's the kind of first time I've not used a standalone sampler. I've always been of the opinion that if you've got an instrument that is dedicated to doing one thing, it's better than something. It's why I never use a Mac, for live using main stage or anything like that. I just don't trust it. Don't trust it. I've seen too many gigs just go horribly wrong where people are relying on that, and it's a laptop for me is kind of, it's a multitasking thing. It will do lots of different things. So for me, having something that you do your emails on and then running a big show on, I'm like, no, I can't.
I mean, I've seen people do where they float two systems, so if one goes down, they can switch, but they're not tied together, so they don't drag each other down. But that's still a lot of gear to...
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, maybe I'm just a bit old school like that, but it just worries me too much. And this is the first time I've not used a standalone sampler, So I'm 10 years behind with the Akai. People are like, what's an Akai? What's a Z8? So this is the first time I've used the samplers in here, and hopefully it'll be fine. I mean, I'm sure it will. I did for the Headspace shows. My band Headspace went out in September. There's a lot of stuff going on in that thing. I always think it's quite funny that we were playing tiny little clubs. My keyboard rig was bigger than Aussie kind of keyboard rig, and we sort of crammed into this tiny little club. And then you come out with the Sabbath thing, and it's kind of huge areas, and then kind of minimal equipment.
So for those of our listeners, viewers out there that don't know about Headspace, can you give us a little synopsis about what you guys are doing this year?
Yeah, well, we've done. Last year, the album I'm Anonymous came out, which was cool, and we managed to fit in a couple of weeks of shows in Europe in September time last year. Then we tried to put some shows together for this summer. Obviously that was difficult because of my commitments with the Sabbath stuff, so we were trying to fit festivals in around the dates of the Sabbath thing. Just wasn't working out, so we decided we'd get on and start writing the next album. So we're about halfway through the next album. That will come out next year, and hopefully we're going to get some shows together. We want to come to America, but it's so difficult to get. We're a small band on a small label without the kind of without the luxury of a huge kind of touring budget. So we kind of, if we come over here, it's got to be for some festivals and then pin some shows around it. But I guess that depends on how the next album does as well, and people are kind of interested to come and see it.
So Headspace, being as self-described a prog band, is the new record kind of at the same prog area as the previous one, or is it expanding?
No, it's going to be still a concept album, but continuing from the previous one. So the plan is we're going to kind of move the characters that are in the first one into the second one. I mean, Damien is the singer, kind of keeps these cards fairly close to his chest, but all I know is that he phoned me up and he was going, "I've got it, it's going to work." So awesome. I'm like, right, okay, if that's what you're going to do, then that's kind of cool. We can kind of put it all together as we go along. And
well, it's lovely in a world where some people think that a lot of modern music is so processed and overthought and whatnot in terms of what's going to work on radio, that you're doing music that comes from such an organic place. And prog is something that is not quite mainstream these days, so in some ways it's underground again, but it's wonderful because that gives you the freedom to express yourself, because it's not about a radio single, it's about the concept of the album. And
basically,
and the band.
There's absolutely no chance of it being played on mainstream radio, so it doesn't give a shit how long it is. You might as well just make it until it feels like it should end. I think that's the way.
Beautiful.
We've always looked at that with Headspace. It's always been about making something that we're really kind of into.
Yeah.
And there's certainly never been a point in that first album. It took us 5 years to finish it. So it was it was done so that we were all happy with it by the end point. And I think I've said before in interviews where when we first started, we had a few labels that wanted to sign us, but wanted us to be heavier, wanted us to be more like Tool or more like whoever.
Right.
And we're like, well, that's not why we're doing it.
Yeah.
The whole point of doing it is, we're paying for it. We're going to make it.
Yeah.
We do what we like, and then if you like it at the end, then we can sign it. Unfortunately, Inside Out and Century Media were kind of at the end point, they were kind of more into it than they were at the start. So
Cool.
I'm glad we didn't change anything, you know.
That's admirable. Stick to your guns.
Well, I think in this day, certainly with prog music, you're kind of, you know, if you're going to start trying to make it more saleable in somebody else's eyes, you're already on a hiding for nothing, because it's already been done. You know,
Yeah.
it's been done 1,000 times, and you can't compete with some of the old school bands. You just got to do your own thing, and then if people like it, then great. You know.
Yeah. Well, luckily, you know, since prog is somewhat of an underground scene, the fans are really core. So the people
Yeah.
who are into prog bands in general are going to be, you know,
I think so.
voracious.
Yeah. Well, I think they're just kind of, you know, there's enough sort of fabricated nonsense in the pop world.
Yeah.
You know, you can't start messing with
Yeah.
kind of prog, which is, you know, it's always had this kind of the history of being kind of progressive. You know,
Yeah.
it's kind of that's the idea of it. But
with 12 notes and, you know, only so many scales and modes, how much more progress can there be?
well, exactly. I mean, Pete Rinaldi, the guitar player, is the most kind of ferocious practicer. And he's so dedicated to, you know, he builds his own 8-string guitars.
Wow.
He, you know, built his own 8-string fretless, which we're using a lot on this new record.
Cool.
And he's got this crazy theory of kind of different, the way of adapting different scales throughout the album, and this kind of link for each one.
Cool.
And it's pretty intense. He'll do a little video blog on it at some point when the album's finished. If it works out how we want it to work out, it's kind of this kind of, it will go through a full cycle of a load of crazy scales which I have no idea what they are.
Awesome. Well, speaking of guitar, I was going to ask, just on a total geek level, what's the song that you play on guitar where when you strap that guitar on, you're the most excited to just jam? Because this is a kind of a dream.
Do you know what this is? I say this to people all the time, that it's kind of, for a keyboard player to then pick up a guitar and play Paranoid, looking across the stage at Tony Iommi, and going, this is kind of what every kid who's ever picked up a guitar or played in a rock band has ever wanted to do. And I kind of, for the first kind of, back in 2004 when I started, I felt like a complete fraud. I'm like, somebody's going to come on in a minute and go, no, he's a kid. Get rid of him. Get rid of him. Get a guitar player in. So I would say, like Children of the Grave. I love playing the start of that. And well, Paranoid, obviously. I mean, pretty much all of the songs.
Yeah.
Picking up a guitar in any of the songs is pretty cool as a keyboard player. Do you know what I mean? It's a pretty big kind of luxury.
And it's nice that you have those two skills, so you can do double duty.
Well, yeah, definitely, and it kind of helps. You know, it helps each one really, because you're knowing how sort of to play the parts on a guitar accurately with Tony.
Yeah.
Means that if I do play them on keyboards, I can kind of, they complement each other. The way you play changes.
Yeah.
Definitely, you know, the kind of sort of staccato-ness and the way you play chords, for example. You know, you're never gonna play a kind of major triad in any Sabbath songs. You know, it's kind of fifths or
all those major seventh
fourths.
chords they use are just beautiful.
That's right. Yeah. So they're noted for their major sevens. And, so yeah, that's been the biggest payoff really with learning guitar. I mean, I only picked up a guitar because I agreed to do a gig 20 years ago where they said, "Do you play guitar?" And I went, "Yeah." No, I don't play guitar, but I learned very quickly, you know, to at least be able to cover the parts.
Nice.
And then I thought, it's a good thing to do. I mean, that's one thing I advise people, anybody that plays any instrument, is learn another instrument.
Yeah.
Because, you know, without kind of making your workload too much, it's kind of, if you can pick up another instrument, an acoustic guitar at some point, in a show, it makes you more hireable.
True.
If you come down to the kind of finances of it, you know, it's down to.
And the knowledge of theory through the keys translates to other instruments so well.
Absolutely.
That when you pick up the guitar and you have that keyboard, you know, the knowledge of theory through the keyboards.
Yeah.
It translates.
Yeah, I mean, originally I kind of went through the classical grade, so my training was from a classical perspective, and that is, you know, that's something that's I use every day.
Yeah. And
it's kind of, I talk to a lot of keyboard players that sort of say, you know, is it important to read music? It's kind of no, but to have an understanding of how it works is very important.
True.
And to know the kind of theory behind why certain things work and why certain things don't make it much quicker when you're working in an environment where you need to be working songs out very quickly.
Yeah.
You know, it sort of it makes your understanding of progressions and scales much easier.
True.
In the kind of real world, in an environment like this. I mean, some of the stuff that Tony plays is, you know, the flat 5 and the kind of, you know, the sort of the minor scales are very kind of, you know, dark, and but there's one tune where the scale is kind of the minor, and then it drops down a tone, and then that's minor as well, which is kind of quite a. And that part, for example, knowing how to play it on a guitar made it very quick, very easy to sort of think, all right, it's actually the minor to the minor,
right?
Which is kind of, you would expect it to be the major, but that's that's kind of knowing how Tony plays. It makes it easier to transpire to know how to play it on there.
Yeah, very cool. So, any last words?
Well, come along to the shows, and any questions.
Come find you afterwards.
Come and find you.
Come find me.
Come find you. But it's going to be a good tour. Hopefully, the Headspace thing will be up and running again next year once we've wrapped up with this. And
people can find the Headspace stuff on iTunes and online.
Yeah, Headspace. The album's called I Am Anonymous, and it's kind of it's prog. Heavy prog.
So look for the Headspace, I Am Anonymous, and the new Headspace next year, as yet untitled.
Yeah.
Adam Wakeman, thank you so much.
Robbie, good to see you again.
Good to see you too. For Keyboard Magazine, we're out of here.